This is Turbo Overkill. Yeah, Turbo Overkill is high-velocity art made with metal, oil, and blood. The game is an absolute blast to play, and although it's in early access at the time of recording this, it doesn't really feel like it due to the fact that they're only releasing the stuff that's very polished at the moment. It is a retro-inspired shooter, of course, that is using a very grungy, chunky cyberpunk style, and really the only thing that you need to know about this game before you just pause this video and go and buy it is that you have what's basically a rocket-powered chainsaw in your leg. Sliding activates thrusters on your leg and folds out a chainsaw, and you can go at very high speed, just flying through the arenas, cleaving through large hordes of enemies, and the game is actually balanced around understanding how to use this chainsaw effectively, because it's very, very powerful and helps you dodge a lot of projectiles and things, but its damage is determined by your speed, so you want to be going as fast as possible when you're using it. It even can actually get headshots on its own, which is kind of impressive, so just coming in out of nowhere at like Mach 6 and just slamming into a dude's head is actually a valid strategy. And all of the arenas in the game are very much set up with this in mind. You'll see lots of ramps and even half-pipes and other things like that, and it's made very clear that this is a major game mechanic and the maps are actually set up to use it. And you know that phrase, when you've got a hammer everything looks like a nail? Well, this game is kind of like that, but you're a bowling ball, basically, so that you're constantly looking out for strikes. You're looking around, seeing lanes everywhere, trying to line up enemies in nice orderly rows, trying to find ramps and stuff like that, and you're constantly looking for the best way to pick up a whole bunch of speed and just cleave through enemies. But as powerful as your chainsaw leg is, you also of course do have an arsenal of weapons, and the weapons that are currently in the early access are very satisfying to use. I think the sound assets for the guns might lack a little bit of impact, but they're still pretty good, and all of the visual effects for firing, the actual combat feedback, is all really satisfying. What's really cool about the weapons is they all have kind of unorthodox alt-fires that make the weapons a little bit different than you might expect. Like the pistols that you start with, the alt-fire of those is basically the smart pistol from Titanfall, only it can lock onto a whole bunch of enemies at once and can be charged up. The dual SMGs instead turn into a single SMG that fires half as fast but hits twice as hard. The pump shotgun, which is actually sort of an energy shotgun, can fire what's basically a shock grenade, and the double-barreled shotgun can fire sticky bombs. And then the dual minigun sort of idea that's really fun to use can transform into a flamethrower. So yeah, the arsenal of this game is quite varied and a little bit unorthodox in a lot of ways, and that makes them very fun to use. There's also a rocket launcher that currently does not have a secondary upgrade yet, although you can detonate the rockets in midair, which is a feature I always enjoy. And the updates for this game are showing some little teasers, little hints of the currently 3 new weapons that are going to be added in the next major update sometime in October, one of which is a plasma gun that can do the Unreal Shock combo, so I'm really interested in that. And it looks like overall the arsenal of this game is going to be a very satisfying, extremely varied package of many different weapons that are all really fun to use. In addition to all of this, you've also got augments that you can find and buy. There are shops around the place. Different enemies will drop coins occasionally when they die, and you can spin these at these shops, and the shops sell augments, which are passive upgrades, and you can find splicing machines that allow you to install these upgrades in various different slots. You have left and right leg slots, which can give you like increased chainsaw power or the ability to jump off walls, for instance. You've also got some other slots, like for instance, eventually you'll get a left arm augmentation that allows you to fire homing micro missiles in a big storm out of your left hand, which is really awesome, and you can augment that as well with things like making it drop cluster bombs. But one of this game's biggest strengths, aside from all this customization and stuff, would be the movement. The movement in this game feels really, really good. You're extremely fast, which is part of the point, because like I mentioned, the chainsaw leg is a main gameplay feature, and its damage is determined by your speed, so obviously moving very fast is the point. Some people are actually a little bit put off at how fast you move at first and a little bit surprised, but once you get used to it, you find that it's actually a really precise movement system. It doesn't feel slidey or like ice physics or anything like that, like some very fast movement does. It's very precise. And you also have extremely precise control of your movement in the air, which is very important because you're going to be spending a lot of time in the air in this game, because you can double jump right from the start. You can also eventually get the ability to wall run. You can dash off of ladders. You have double dashes that can be used on the ground or in midair. And of course, your chainsaw slide can also be used in midair to allow you to evade projectiles and things, as well as just get to farther areas as almost like an extra dash. The pump shotgun's alt-fire also acts as basically a rocket jump, which is really fun. But yeah, while you're in the air, you have very tight control of your character. It's to the point where you can actually jump off of a ledge, go around like a 90-degree corner, see if there's anything hidden over there, and jump back to where you began without ever touching the ground or falling at all. You have such precise control. The movement in this game just feels so good to use that it's really nice how they actually incorporated into the big arenas for fights and into the overall level progression, because you'll find that the levels in this game are very large, and they often have a lot of complicated geometry when it comes to how the arenas work, and a lot of verticality, so that you're always in the air, you're always dashing around, you're always finding ramps, you're always just flying through the place, and it makes interacting with all these maps really enjoyable, because if the movement is that good, and the maps are actually designed with all this movement in mind, that means there's a lot of opportunities to just open up and go crazy. And in fact, I'm currently playing this game on the hard difficulty, and you really do have to kind of go ham if you want to survive. There are actually 2 difficulties above hard, which I'm not going to try yet, but you do need to dash and jump and go fast and just never ever sit still if you want to actually survive. And because of the way the maps are designed, with all these fun open areas with lots of verticality and open space to fly around in and stuff, it makes the combat a real joy to play. The levels are also really technically impressive in the way that they wrap back around in interesting ways. You'll often find yourself backtracking through a level, but not in the traditional boring sense, that it often will spawn new enemies to recontextualize old arenas and make you have new threats to face and things like that, but also you'll find that there are certain locked doors that you'll go through, or certain other areas that you'll open up later that give the map a different feel, as if you're sort of opening up more of it. So when you backtrack, it's not like you're walking through an empty map with nothing new, it's like you're walking through a recontextualized version of an old part of the map with a bunch of new stuff to see. And it's, in my opinion, really, really good design when you see the way that certain elevators connect to previous parts of the map, or certain jump pads will bring you to other areas you didn't think were that close together but actually are. It gives the maps a really organic, cohesive feel when you kind of recognize the various areas that you're going through and can backtrack in a way that actually doesn't feel like you're lost or you don't know where to go. Generally, the game is really good at signposting for you with new lighting and new enemy spawns to help make sure you always know where you're going, so even though the maps can be quite sprawling, they usually don't feel like it's easy to get lost and not know what you're expected to do. The game really likes to show off in its map design, having a lot of layers on top of other layers. So you'll be battling through a couple of arenas later on, and then you'll realize that they're actually all built on top of where you were previously, and you can actually see all of the areas that you were in previously, and even jump down to them if you want, because there's no fall damage. So the game is a big fan of its verticality, and since I'm also a big fan of that, and it matches really well with the game's movement system, it makes the map design really enjoyable to go through. There are, of course, loads of secrets hidden around the place. There are several cassette tapes and technology chips that you can find, as well as just other hidden secrets like ammo caches and secret armors and things like that. So there's a lot of rewarding exploration to be done. Since the maps are so large and reward such complex movement systems, you can do a lot of shenanigans and just kind of roam around the maps in weird ways. And oftentimes you'll find that if you see a thing and you're wondering, can I get over there? The answer is almost every time, yes you can, and there's probably something waiting for you there if you do. As far as enemy variety goes, it's actually pretty impressive. There are more enemy varieties than I expected, considering it's only the first episode right now. I didn't expect quite so many, and some of them are pretty mean. Again, I am playing on hard, so obviously the damage is quite high, but still, some of them are pretty ruthless to deal with, especially the big spider robot things with homing missiles, and the weird, disturbing torso guys that shoot out like X-shaped lightning blasts at you that are kind of hard to dodge. There's a good amount of projectile using enemies and not really any hit scan stuff, so you always have the chance to actually get out of the way, and since you can dash and wall run and stuff, it makes you really need to use all of your movement skills as best as you can to tear the enemy ranks apart while also not getting hit. This game is really, really fast. I'm sure I've probably made that clear already, but just to be sure, it's fast, and if you're not used to very, very fast games, then you might actually have a bit of a hard time with this, and luckily there are a lot of difficulty levels to choose from to help with that. But yeah, this is definitely a game where at the higher skill levels you need to be constantly on the move and constantly using all of your skills, and this turns some of the harder combats into more like puzzle combats. You know what I'm saying? Where it spawns in a very specific combination of different enemy types you've seen before, and you have to sort of pick them apart without getting blown up, and it's actually quite difficult because they tend to cover each other very well, and the AI is actually quite good in this game. So some of the harder combats are almost like a Doom Eternal style combat puzzles where you've got to really use your arsenal and all of your movement skills to come out on top. And the big battles in the larger areas tend to be pretty memorable because the areas have a lot of interactivity to them. A lot of things explode and come apart and get blasted to pieces, which makes just a lot of environmental interaction, which always makes gunfights more satisfying when you actually see the environment responding and actual destruction happening and dust getting kicked up and things breaking and falling apart. And there are even some really cool sections like big sort of hollow screens that you can break and get behind, so you can blow holes in the environment to get to the sort of background of all the tech stuff. There's even even one big battle that takes place on a vaporwave album art that you actually play in, which is pretty great. The music is also quite good. It's got a lot of like synthwave stuff, and it fits the sort of grungy Blade Runner cyberpunk aesthetic quite well. The exploration tracks are relatively tranquil and kind of relaxing, but very upbeat because there's all this neon and all these screens everywhere and stuff. And then the combat tracks are very fast, very frenetic, just like the actual combat itself. So overall, I'm having a blast with it. I think Turbo Overkill is a great game. I think it's shaping up to be one of the best retro-inspired shooters that we've seen release. And can I just say how cool it is, by the way, to see Apogee, of all people, actually back and publishing stuff like this? That's just awesome to me. Booting it up and seeing their logo was great. It brings me back to my childhood a little bit. But it's just one of those games where I'm very, very excited to see what comes next. You know, I want to see what Episode 2 is going to be like. I want to play with the new weapons. I want to see the new enemies. I want to see the boss fights and the new augments. And there's just so much to the game that's so fun that it's very easy to get super excited about what's coming and still be able to very much enjoy what's already here for the price. If I had to reach for any criticisms or bug reports or anything like that, since it is an early access and I like to do this sort of thing, well, I haven't really encountered any bugs, to be honest. It all feels very polished so far, but I will say I'm not a huge fan of the rooftops level. I think it kind of breaks the flow of the game, because the game is at its best in its more traditional level design, which is very large, open, vertical, and rooftops is like a series of small, self-contained arenas sort of on rooftops, spread apart from each other, where you don't really get to use much of your movement abilities, and it just spawns in a lot of enemies for you to fight. And the vehicle controls are a little bit strange, and it's just overall, although it definitely doesn't ruin the experience by any means, it is the weakest level in the entire game in my opinion so far, because it just sort of breaks the flow, you know? It takes away the large sort of combat spaces with all the crazy movement and stuff that the game has been based on so far, and replaces it with very cramped one-off arenas, and it's just not quite as enjoyable. But I definitely recommend Turbo Overkill. If you're a fan of retro FPS at all, this is definitely one to take a look at. I will of course link you in the description below this video to the Steam store page so you can take a look at the early access campaign as it currently stands, purchase it if you want to, wishlist it if you want to actually keep an eye on it, and there's going to be a pretty large update coming in October, so excited to see what that brings. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.